Hello gentlemen, I've got a build to show you. This is my int stacking Scion Wonder, a build that has received significant improvements this patch. Now first of all, this build is amazing, especially on a pre-made spot budget, and so far this is probably my favourite all-rounder build I've ever played, even compared to multi-mirror builds that I've played in the past. This build demolishes maps, can tank nearly everything, has ridiculous recovery, can defeat Ubers with ease, all while being able to do any map mod. The budget for this build, I'm going to guess all the way from about 60 to 150 divines. Now, with the budget, it is very cheap right now as long as you self-craft, and there are a lot of areas where you can sacrifice a little bit of damage or survivability to drastically reduce the budget. For the actual crafting of the build, I will release a guide in the next couple of days showing you the hard parts to craft. Now, for the actual build, we stack int, which gives us flat lightning damage per 10 int, as well as spell damage per 16 int. This is from our wands. A mastery and a tree also allows us to stack accuracy with our int, and this solves our accuracy issue through this one passive. Int also inherently gives us energy shield, and that allows us to scale both our damage and defense at the same time through one stat. For our main skill, I'm using Kinetic Bolt of Fragmentation. Out of all wand skills I've tested, this skill has outperformed all others handily, on single target especially, while also having some of the best clear of any skill in the game. This skill used to be very popular until it got nerfed, and now there are only about 12 people playing this skill, at least on PoE Ninja, and there is only one scion doing it, that is me. I think this skill is incredibly underrated, especially this patch where it has received a buff, increasing its damage effectiveness as well as the number of times it's changed direction. These buffs are very significant in improving the build's damage and clear. And also, the buffs mean one thing: the skill is actually stronger than it was pre-nerf, with the only exception being not having increases to spell damage applied to attack damage. However, this is easily solvable with Crown of Eyes. This patch has also introduced Bloodline Ascendancies as well as Foulborn items. With the Lycia Bloodline, plus the Sinner Saint and Foulborn Blue Nightmare, we can convert all our lightning damage to chaos. This gives us a bevy of benefits, including Wither for 90% increased damage taken on enemies, as well as lower enemy chaos res inherently. We also gain benefits such as Reflect Immunity and more I will describe later on. What's even better about this setup is due to the way Scion works, we can get the Bloodline Ascendancy and only lose 3 skill points. As always, all links including POB will be in the description, as well as timestamps if you want to skip around. With introductions out of the way, let's talk about skills. We're using Kinetic Bolt of Fragmentation for this setup. This skill, projectiles change direction as we fire them, spawning more projectiles when they change direction. With returning projectiles, we can make it so these extra projectiles will hit the same target, and with Sniper's Mark, we can cause each projectile to split off into even more projectiles for a shit ton extra damage. For our links, the 2 most important gems are returning projectiles and fork. Ideally, you want Awakened Fork, however regular fork will do fine. We also want Void Manipulation, Sacred Wisps, and Power Charge on crit in our links. While other damage gems might be more effective than Power Charge on crit, this does the important job of producing our power charges for single target. So even if it might look like it's more damage switching over to another support gem, this is crucial for sustaining our power charges. As for our other gems, we will be using an aura setup with Enlighten level 3 or level 4 linked with Tempest Shield and Discipline. As for our final link, it will depend on which version of the build you're running. If you're running the more expensive version, then use Grace. If you're running the more achievable version, use Purity of Elements. For the rest of the auras, we will socket it into one of our weapons, and we will be using Precision, plus Arctic Armor, And our final link will depend if you're using level 3 or level 4 Enlighten. If you're using level 4, then put Vitality in the final link, if not, use Flame Dash. For the other slot we will use an Immortal Call setup, linked with cast when damage taken, and more duration. Ideally we want all of the gems to be level 21, however if you don't have the strength requirement, then just socket the highest level gem you can afford. This setup is incredibly nice as we do use endurance charge on this build and we do generate them. This helps immensely, particularly during mapping, to help solve our fizz mitigation issues. For our gloves we will run a Sniper's Mark setup. I link it with Mark on Hit and Enhance. If you want to save budget you can use a level 3 Enhance. On the other hand you do need to make sure your Mark on Hit gem is either level 21 with 20 quality or level 20 with 23 quality. This is important as it gives us enough mark effect to get 50% increased total mark effect. 50% increased mark effect allows us our sniper mark to go from splitting twice to 3 times, which is a lot of extra damage. Finally, the last gem you want to socket in your gloves is Flesh and Stone. When using Flesh and Stone, make sure to use Sand Stance, as Blood Stance does literally nothing for our build. Finally, for our boots we will use Shield Dash, linked with faster attacks, and finally add in Despair. If you're not using an Abyssal socket on your boots, then you have a spare link to socket whatever you want. As for the skill tree, the first thing you'll probably notice is these 3 jewels here. Now, picking Scion lets us do this, as we are so close to these 3 jewels. What's going on is we're using Lethal Pride to give all these small passives in its area plus strength. Now with this plus strength we're using Transcendent Flesh to turn that on our unallocated passives to critical strike multiplier. Now these 2 jewels combined with this jewel gives us about 200% increased critical strike multiplier and is massive for our damage. It is one of the reasons we picked Scion, but there are many more that I will tell in the Ascendancy section. As for the pathing, instead of going directly over here to the nodes, we are taking a bit of a detour, as this allows us to get 10 dexterity nodes. We can turn these 10 dexterity nodes into 10 mark effect nodes. This will give us 40% increased mark effect, combined with our Ascendancy, that gives us 65, and then we have minus 15 from Mark on Hit, which will get us to exactly 50% mark effect. 50% mark effect turns our Sniper's Mark from splitting twice into splitting 3 times. These splits will of course split off, and with returning projectiles will come back and hit the same enemy, meaning that this is very important to make sure we have as much damage as possible. We pick reservation nodes on the tree here and here for our auras. We also grab Rune Graph of Treachery for reservation efficiency. Due to the auras we're running, this doesn't really limit us much and gives us 15% reservation for 1 point. We also grab power charges on the tree in all 3 spots, and for our notables we grab Ghost Reaver and CI. We get Life Leech from our helmet and we can turn that into ES Leech with Ghost Reaver. For our clusters, it's not that important what we get for the second and third passive, but what's really important is Overwhelming Malice. This gives us Wither. Now Wither is incredibly important as it increases the damage enemies take from Chaos by 1.9 as long as we have 15 stacks. We also grab Enduring Composure on the tree with a small cluster. This is how we generate endurance charges and is a very nice defensive layer because we take this endurance charge over here. We take these 2 wand nodes over here because we're at Wander, and same with the int nodes. We're an int stacker and this gives us more int. For the masteries, you want to make sure you have wand attacks fire an additional projectile, and int is added to your accuracy. This one mastery will solve your accuracy issues. And due to the fact we are power charge stacking, we are also going to take crit chance as well as crit multi from the power charge node here. For our last cluster jewel, we will either take a one with prestigious defense, martial prowess and veteran defender, or if you've got a bit higher budget, you want something like this that has 12 passives, increasing your spell damage, giving you 4 all attributes, 8 int and 35% increase effect. If you have one without 10 maximum energy shield, that's fine, but you will need these 3 nodes. We also pick up block on the tree over here, and the rest of the block we will get through our gear and jewels. Finally, depending on your budget, if you're running the higher budget, you want these evasion and energy shield mastery to give you increased evasion per 5 int, as well as ghost shroud. However, if you are running the lower budget version, you will take these points out and instead put them over here to grab Heart of Darkness, as well as the Chaos Mastery. Due to Discipline and the Runegraph Treachery, this 10% more damage to enemies which have energy shield will be active all the time. Now, talking about the rest of the jewels. First of all, we use a Forbidden Flesh. Allocate. What you want for this is whatever one is cheapest. So in my instance, I've taken Deadeye. However, with our Ascendancy, you can also get one with a Cultist or Guardian. You need to make sure it's one of the 3. We are also using a Watcher's Eye. The most important mod on this is energy shield per enemy hit while affected by Discipline. Chance to block spell damage is also really nice, but it is not necessary as you can get spell block in other ways. This is just the other Forbidden Flesh. We're going to skip that one for later because that will need more of an explanation. These 2 jewels over here should be split personality. It's very important that they are over here in particular, as this is the 2 furthest jewel slots away from the start of the tree. Finally, for our last jewel, we will use either Replica Reckless Defense or Rational Doctrine. However, this depends on if you're using... this depends entirely on how much block you have. If you need to cap your block, then use Replica Reckless. If not, Rational Doctrine is better. Due to the way that Scion works, if we spend all 6 of our Ascendancy points in the tree, we only get 2 notables, because the last 2 points can only go into grabbing these 2 nodes or another starting point. Now this is useless for our build and many builds. So this means if we, instead of spending these 2 Ascendancy points on what effectively gives us 3 skill points, we can put them in a Bloodline Ascendancy, and that is what we're going to start off the Ascendancy section off with. Now we're grabbing Sinner Saint for one reason. This lets us convert all our damage to chaos and lets us benefit from the many benefits of chaos conversion, such as the lower base res, as most bosses have 50 elemental res and 30 chaos res, combined, and most importantly, with Wither, giving us a 1.9 times damage increase. Chaos also lets us benefit from this nodes over here and that 10% more damage. Now, the Ascendancy from the Bloodline only gives us 50% conversion, so it does beg the question, where do we get the rest of it from? And it's from here, the Foulborn Blue Nightmare. This gives our lightning res in this radius the ability to convert our lightning damage to chaos. We have got 8 nodes of lightning res in the radius, which we get through tattoos. This gives us 48% lightning res. This 48% lightning res gets converted to chaos conversion, and this gives us 98% total damage converted to chaos. While we can't get 100%, that 2% is negligible to our DPS, especially compared to the benefits we get from conversion. And what's even better about the Foulborn Blue Nightmare is usually that 10% of lightning damage as extra chaos isn't that great, as you get the extra lightning, you get the extra chaos damage and you don't scale it. However, on this build, because we're chaos converting, this is effectively 10% more DPS. Now for the other Ascendancies. We've already talked a lot about Sniper's Mark, and we get Deadeye through our Forbidden Flesh and Forbidden Flame. This is very nice, we mainly take it for the mark effect, however an additional projectile is huge for the damage, and Tailwind is 8% action speed for an effective 8% more DPS. Deadeye is incredibly important for this build and its damage. Next up we take a Cultist. A Cultist does a few things. First of all, it gives us stun immunity. Due to the way that CI works, it sets our life to 1 and gives us chaos immunity. Now the issue with setting our life to 1 is the fact that our stun threshold is based on the life. So this means if you've not got a solution to stuns, then you're going to get stunned on literally every single hit by an enemy. Through our Ascendancy, with a Cultist, this just gives us stun immunity while we have energy shield, and because we're stacking energy shield, this gives us stun immunity all the time. The 10% effect of Curse and the regen 1.5 energy shield per second is also very nice, but the second reason we get it is you can apply an additional Curse. This is huge for the damage. This build's damage and is effectively 30 to 40% more damage, as it lets us run both Sniper's Mark and Despair. Finally, for our last Ascendancy, we grab Guardian. Guardian is amazing and probably one of Scion's best Ascendancy points. The 25% reservation is already huge, with the rest just being amazing add-ons. Every 4 seconds we also regen 50% of our life. Due to Zealot's Oath over here, this regen will apply to energy shield, and this energy shield regen is equivalent to about 12.5% per second. You will definitely feel this during both of mapping and bossing, and is quite frankly amazing. Finally, the last thing it does is give us attack or spell block depending on if we've attacked or cast recently. While we won't be casting recently, we will definitely be attacking a lot recently, and this helps cap our block. As for our gear, first of all, in our weapon slot we are going to use a wand with both int stacking mods and chaos pen. The rest of the mods can be multi-modded for attack speed plus crit chance with int and dex. For shields we're going to use a +1 power charge base with a high, and our goal is to get as high as possible block and spell block. And because of this, we aren't actually using an ES base despite the fact that we are stacking energy shield. Using a non-ES base, particularly any strength base, also allows you to get suffixes such as fizz damage reduction. Other good mods include reduced crit damage taken and Ellie Riz. However, you don't need them on your build, and you really should just grab the mods that you want. So if you're missing res, craft something like that. For our helmet we are using Crown of Eyes. Right now +1 power charge is incredibly cheap, and I mean 3C cheap, so there's no reason not to get this with a good corrupt. The helmet is incredibly important as it does 2 things. First of all, the spell damage we are stacking from our wand with its +1 spell damage per 16 int, it gets applied to our attacks at 150% of its value. This is huge for our damage. Secondly, this is the easiest source of mana and life leech I have found. If you were to get it elsewhere, it would most likely cost you 1 to 2 passive points. As for the gloves, we want one with as much ES as possible. However, because the ES rolls us lower, it's less important. For the suffixes, we want int and also whatever res you need. I would craft this with attack speed essences, as this is also a very nice mod to have due to the fact that we lack attack speed on this build. For the implicits, you want damage per 100 int and rage on hit. Rage on hit is very important, as this one mod will sustain our rage generation and provide about 30% more damage, especially considering how often we hit because of the way Kinetic Bolt of Fragmentation works. Finally, for our boots, it's pretty simple. We want int on the suffix, and for the prefix we want movement speed. Capping your res with this is also a very nice thing that you can do, as the other suffixes aren't too important. If you can get an abyssal socket on this, it would also be very nice. However, all you really care about is int and movement speed, and you could actually probably find one from the trade site for very cheap. For our body armor, we're going with a very simple rare chest with as much ES as possible. And for suffixes, int plus attributes. For implicits, we want damage reduction per 180 int, however you can go 190, 200, etc. And Tempest Shield effect. We need Tempest Shield effect to cap our spell block. While I have 28% quality in the POB, it is not necessary, and getting slightly less ES will make the build incredibly cheaper. Our amulet will be one with a percentage int synth implicit, with as much int as possible for the suffixes, getting T1 int and ideally T1 all attributes. Global crit multi is also a good mod for the suffix. Your prefixes are less important, but ideally you'd want maximum energy shield and maybe crafted damage while leeching. Our rings will either be a helical ring or a percentage int ring. This depends on whatever's cheaper, as they are both pretty much identical in terms of stat. So if you can grab a percentage int ring for cheap, I would go with that over a helical. For both rings you want to use the global crit essence and spam that until you hit T1 int. Then to finish it off, you just want to craft all attributes and you're done. Our belt is very simple as well. We are using a percent int synth belt. For the mods on that, you want to use int essences, and the other two suffixes just depend on what you need for the build and are very useful for filling in stuff like res, or even if you need extra strength on the build. Finally, for our graphs, we want percent int on both, and for the actual graphs, we want one with overcharged sinews, preferably one that is level 34, as the bonus goes from 2% to 3%, and once fully stacked, this will give us 30% more damage. Because our damage range is so large, this is pretty huge for our build. It does come with the downside of taking 10% more damage, so if you feel like your damage is fine and you want a bit more defense, then you can drop this for any other percentage int graft. Finally, our last graft, we want one with Wreathed in Light. This is important for the lucky damage. Because we've got such a large attack range, lucky damage is huge for the build. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed. If you've got a comment, leave it in the comments. I'm happy to answer any question. If you liked it, like, and if you want to see more, subscribe. Next video is probably going to be the crafting guide. After that, I might leave the super expensive version for a bit because it's just really hard to get the currency together when every single item costs like 100 div. And honestly, I want to play some cheaper builds because I've got to the point in my pro career where it's just playing with Mage Blood all the time isn't actually that fun. And I prefer testing out these like 50 div builds, seeing how far I can get when I limit the budget. You know, like destroying a map and taking no damage when you've got a mirror in your build is less impressive when you do the same with like 20 div. But yeah, it's been fun. It might take a while for the next build to come out because I am testing new ideas and I don't like making builds and posting them when I feel like there's something that I can improve in them or I'm not bringing the best version possible out. Anyway, thanks for watching.